Well, although I was involved with the very early days of squash, of the Barrington, Hunt, Zaman, and then Jahangir era, I don't know quite why that was, but I saw less of the Jansher era. I knew Chris Dittmar very well, and people in that era, Dean Williams from Australia as well, they were all part of that era, but I saw Jansher play less. I remember watching him at Wembley when the British Open was there against Peter Marshall, but clearly the impressions, and judging from your previous interviews with players, and the regard and esteem he's held in, and clearly I must have held him in the same esteem and still do, because I told James, as I mentioned on the previous video, to watch him, study his videos, see how he moved, see how he played, and use that as a model. So, you know, his style and his languidity and ease of racket and reading of the game were things that probably the best you've ever seen, I would think, in one package. And as an individual, he was quite shy, or appeared to be, and I think it was a language thing. So he never projected, perhaps in the same way that Jahangir did, or that later Peter Nicol did. And maybe, again, for that reason, he was slightly undersold. I remember a match, though, at Wembley with Peter Marshall, where for 2 games, Peter was the toughest guy you could imagine, physically and mentally, was run and made to look like a novice. But he hung on like a dog hanging onto someone's trousers, and gradually got to Jansher, who, although he never appeared to run and move very, quickly, it didn't seem to be not taking them. It did actually begin to tire a little, and Peter fought his way into the match, and in my remembrance of it, he was close in the 4th, and you felt that maybe if he'd just survived that Jansher's physical resources had diminished enough to give Peter a chance. But I remember that as an outstanding match, and Jansher won it because his skill levels, the 2-0 lead, were enough anyway against Peter's tremendous tenacity and toughness. You wouldn't compare them as players because Peter was double-handed, not aesthetic to watch. Jansher was just the opposite. So, he ranks with all the great champions, Hashim Khan, through to Jahangir, and through to himself. And probably that was a golden era in its way, but compared with today, lacks the depth and the challenge from the early rounds that exist now. It's a much harder game to come through and win, like whoever wins here will have played 5 or 6 matches in 5 or 6 days. They didn't have to do that in those days. They could saunter through. Part of it was of their own making, and in Jansher's case, very much the case, because he could put people aside. But I still think it's a harder proposition nowadays. It gets harder and harder. But one of the world's greatest ever, and by consensus of the players you interviewed, probably the greatest.